This is a Phoner podcast.
In the final episode of our green and pleasant town, we explore the history of the Forest Recreation Ground, an extraordinary green space that has seen both the very best and the worst of the people of Nottingham.
Do you remember the old forest waste ground? Some of us do. Faint memories of childhood rambles on the lings. Treasured memories of people like Herbert Spencer, who wrote of his delight in scrambling among the gorse bushes that towered above his boyish head. The thrill of exploring the wild forest, following the narrow tracks of turf that crisscrossed everywhere and came out in unexpected places.
Or ended suddenly in deep, sandy chasms made by the cart going down to the sand pits. In springtime, the ground was full of bluebells, and the prickly branches of gorse were flecked with scraps of wool left by passing sheep. 13 windmills lined the ridge, 7 sails turning clockwise and 6 going widdershins. We used to joke we were grinding and ungrinding.
Once a royal hunting park, the preserve of kings, this southernmost end of Sherwood Forest became home to the sport of kings when a racetrack was laid out in 1689. Thousands would come to place their bets and thrill to the thunder of the horses' hooves as they raced for the king's plate. Thrills that could soon turn to despair, the enchantments of the turf bringing many a young gentleman to ruin.
The forest offered thrills of a darker nature too. Gallows Hill stood beside it, a flat piece of land on Mansfield Road, where prisoners were brought in a cart for execution. The people came running in their hundreds to jostle for a good spot, standing in the gallows' shadow.
Some singing hymns, others jeering. The noise of the crowd well nigh unbearable, until the cart came to a stop beneath the gallows crossbeam. The silence then was sudden and terrible, as all eyes were fixed on the hangman and his prisoner. The last execution on the forest was that of William Wells, a Peterborough man found guilty of a violent highway robbery in 1827.
William Wells, you have been convicted of a highway robbery by evidence that can leave no doubt upon the mind of any human being of your guilt. I am sorry to say, such are the circumstances of the case that it is impossible for me to hesitate one moment how to act. For mercy to you would be cruelty to the honest part of the community.
William Wells blamed his misfortunes on the turf, claiming he was persuaded to purchase a racehorse, a career which proved his ruin and bankruptcy. A stout-made man with black hair, dark eyes and a florid complexion, he endured his trial stoically, showing no emotion, even as the judge pronounced the sentence of death upon him. A great crowd pressed round the cart as it made its grim journey up to Gallows Hill, with William at its heart, bareheaded, his arms pinioned to his sides with thick ropes. Beneath the gallows, William passed his last moments in prayer while the noose was adjusted. Then, with a touch of the whip on the horse's back, the cart plunged forward, and William Wells was left spinning round and round as the crowd gave voice to hoots and groans, hymns and prayers.
And may God of his great compassion have mercy upon your soul.
We called the forest a waste ground. But nothing was wasted there. It was a place where the best and the worst came together. Life and death, beauty and despair.
And the forest's beating heart was the racecourse. The racecourse which doubled as the town's military training ground and also a cricket pitch.
That almost made the forest hallowed ground, cricket being tantamount to a second religion in Nottinghamshire. When the town's 1845 Enclosure Act was passed, the corporation made sure that it preserved the forest's race ground, cricket ground and military training ground for public recreation. Edwin Patchett, local solicitor and clerk to the Enclosure Commissioners, remembers it well.
Of course, the forest has always been important to me, personally, as well as to the town. I built my home here, Forest House, with its 30 acres of land and garden, Patchett's Park they call it. It overlooks one of the turns on the racecourse, though I'm not that much of a betting man. Cricket's my game, and I've had the honour of playing for Nottingham several times. But it's been a greater honour to serve the town and to play my part in the fight for enclosure. It's a source of pride to me that everywhere around us might be seen the results and blessings of the great local changes which are taking place as a result of the Act. A new town is building up in our midst, with a splendour of design and beauty not excelled by any other town in my recollection, and almost exceeding the power of Aladdin's lamp to create. But it's not enough to create a new Nottingham with new housing, roads and green spaces. We must fight on to further improve and maintain our new town. That's what people don't understand. All of this, these new baths, parks and cricket grounds, have to be paid for. And where's the money to come from if not from the rates? It's all very well for that Tory rag, the Journal, to vilify us for charging entry fees to the Arboretum on 4 days of the week. But now that the Arboretum is no longer self-supporting, its attractions as a pleasure park are greatly reduced. People won't listen to reason, though, and the Journal delights in stirring up public opinion against the corporation. They've tried the same game with the Forest Cricket Ground. It's in a neglected state and needs to be enlarged and relaid. That's going to cost money. And it's not just the initial improvements. The ground won't remain in good order without further maintenance costs. At the least, 2 or 3 men constantly employed upon it. Properly managed, with clubs charged for playing matches there, the Forest Cricket Ground would be self-sustaining and produce a good revenue. Now, what's the Journal's response to our proposals for improving the Forest Recreation Ground? An article beneath the banner, "A Free Forest," that's a thinly disguised attempt to incite a riot. It even goes so far to say this, and I quote, "We do not counsel you to go by force and tear down the wire fences and pull up the plantations, although we believe them to be illegally placed there." Well, that serves no purpose other than to put the idea of mob rule in people's heads. It's a disgrace. They've attacked me personally, as usual, claiming that all the council's alterations and expenditure on the forest is for my benefit. Listen to this. "Except it is done to convert the ground into a private park and give it an ornamental appearance in front of Mr. Patchett's house, we can discover no earthly motive or use in it." Utter poppycock. The corporation's sole aim is to recreate and preserve a green space for the people of Nottingham to enjoy, with a well-maintained racecourse and cricket ground for their recreation and entertainment, free of charge. As the Bible says, prophets have no honour in their own town, and so we must fight on, without being honoured for it, to preserve these green spaces for future generations to come. I have a little scheme of my own in mind, to commemorate the birth of our new Nottingham. I'll let you in on it. I plan to mark the 20th anniversary of Nottingham's Enclosure Act by planting an English oak tree on the forest. A fitting tribute to our work to bring about enclosure, and a symbol that will stand proud for generations to come, as I hope our legacy, Nottingham's green spaces, will stand alongside it.
Edwin Patchett did indeed plant a commemorative oak tree on the forest in 1865, the year the Nottingham Enclosure Award was completed. The tree was grown from an acorn brought from Windsor Great Park. A slow-growing oak, Quercus robur, or common oak, it still stands today, testament to the innovative work of Nottingham's corporation.
Edwin Patchett left his mark on the forest in another way too, for he was one of the founders of the Robin Hood Regiment of Volunteers. It was Edwin Patchett who issued the handbills and circulars that were distributed around the town, inviting volunteers to join the corps.
Although the initial response was disappointing, the names of exactly 7 applicants being sent in for enrolment. The movement gained momentum, however, and soon there were enough volunteers to form 6 companies. The first field day of the new regiment was held in Patchett's Park, with 400 men taking part. And so the Robin Hood Rifles were born and became a regular sight on the forest's military training ground, as Samuel Collinson, one of the early recruits, remembers.
In those days, I was often up on the forest with my company. It was hard work to begin with, even though I fancied I'd kept myself in good shape with my regular walking. Still, I wasn't such a young man, having reached the age of 46. I joined the Castle Company one June evening in 1859, having gone up there to see them drill. I was so taken with them, I joined the club on the spot and spent the evening going through my facings with the awkward squad. And very awkward we were, us raw recruits, while we found our feet, so to speak. In those early days, I'd be up there to drill most mornings at 6 o'clock, and often again in the evening. At least I found there a good appetite for my breakfast. Sometimes the movements in extended line, at double quick time, were very wearying, and I felt almost knocked up at the end of the drill, but they soon licked us into shape. A good thing too, as there were often a large number of lookers-on in the evening, many of them ladies. By August, we'd made excellent progress, and we were able to acquit ourselves honourably at the Duke of Newcastle's inspection. I remember that afternoon as though it were yesterday. We marched up to Mayor Patchett's forest house at 2 o'clock. Already, many had arrived there, and the scene was very lively. The rifles fell in on the lawn in front of the house, and were then marched to the ground on the forest. The Duke of Newcastle, the Mayor, Mayoress, and several ladies and gentlemen then arrived and took up their station near the flagstaff. The rifles were formed into line near rank in open order. The Duke passed up and down the line, and the company then marched past in slow and quick time with great precision. The Castle Company in front were markedly noticed by the Duke, which made all our hard work worthwhile. This being gone through, the companies then formed 4 deep and marched with the yeomanry band to an open space up the hill in the Forest Park, and went through skirmishing evolutions and eventually formed 3 sides of a square. The Corporation Loving Cup, filled with sherry, was brought out. The Mayor announced that the Mayoress named the corps the Robin Hood Rifles, and he drank the toast.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you His Grace the Duke of Newcastle and the Robin Hood Rifles.
The cup was passed round, a salute was fired from cannon placed in the park, and the Duke made an excellent speech. The rifles then formed 4 deep and marched down into Market Place, with Castle Company in front. After 3 cheers, we dispersed. It was a glorious day, and the scene in the Forest Park was beautiful. We took part in these manoeuvres every year, and always acquitted ourselves well in front of the great crowds that would turn out to watch us. It's an exciting spectacle to see us going through our evolutions alongside the other regiments with our grand parades, forming squares, cavalry, and firing volleys from kneeling ranks. Then it's reform the column, deploy into line, fire a volley, charge in line, and the excitement of the soldiers and the rushing about amongst the crowd, such squeezing and tumbling head over heels. Sometimes I would not have my rifle out of my hand for 5 minutes from 12 o'clock until 7. I'd come home hot, tired and dusty, and glad to have a good wash. Then I feel fresh as a daisy and ready for anything. Yes, I have many good memories of the forest from my time with the Robin Hood rifles. If only I could say the same about the Nottingham races. I rarely go to the races now. It's strange that I don't feel any desire to go anymore, having scarcely ever missed before when I had leisure. Ever since my dear wife Mary died, I've not had the heart for crowds, and there are always vast numbers of people there. Great numbers of undesirables as well, blacklegs and scamping turfmen from out of town, and of the most villainous looking character. These days, I find I hate the noise and jostling and sweaty smells and onion breath of a mob. It seems a useless hubbub and bustle and jamming and squeezing. Nor do I care for the unsavoury behaviour I've witnessed at the races. I've seen some curious scenes. Men, well known, occupying respectable positions, married men, sitting in the drinking places at the stand with an assemblage of whores, standing treat and the hail fellow well met. I prefer to keep my distance from those sorts of goings-on.
The louche attractions of the racecourse might not have been to Samuel Collinson's taste, but it was generally agreed that the improvements made by the newly established race committee, following enclosure, had revitalised the Nottingham races. Money had been spent on improving the course by lowering the hills at each end and raising the valley on the south side. An embankment had been made around the course, with a walk 9 feet wide on the top. On the south, the forest rose up boldly and gave the thousands of spectators as good a view of the sport as any to be had from the grandstand.
Nor had money been spared on the grandstand itself, a large and handsome brick building that had seen better days. It was newly furnished and upholstered, repaired and redecorated, with the welcome addition of a ladies' and gentlemen's retiring room. The cost of a ticket to the grandstand would now buy the more genteel and discerning racegoer guaranteed comfort and elegance.
While those who chose to attend the races free of charge, settling themselves on the hillsides or the embankment, still enjoyed the benefit of the improvements to the betting ring, the only place where gambling was allowed. The ring now occupied an area of fully an acre, with a new and commodious telegraph at the foot of the ring. Even so, the Nottinghamshire Guardian reported that it was not a bit too large, being crowded on both days. More than likely, bets were also taken illegally outside the ring. After all, what was a day at the races without the odd flutter?
All money well spent. Although not all of the new facilities were considered an improvement, the enterprising race committee had introduced an elegantly fitted up roulette booth close to each side door of the grandstand,
where, as the Guardian commented, all who have too much money can obtain ready relief, and people of desperate fortunes may endeavour to improve their circumstances. On the first day, the booths proved popular, netting their owners handsome profits.
But the next morning, the magistrates received a tip-off and a police force was sent to remove them at noon, by force if necessary. Tip-offs can work both ways, and a whisper got abroad that the bobbies were coming, and so everything was cleared away before they arrived. Still, there was plenty left for the police to do in dealing with the many swell mobsmen, smashers, rogues and pickpockets the races always attracted.
In spite of the dangers of having your pocket picked, or losing your shirt on a horse,
Or maybe because of them.
a day at the races remained a favourite day's holiday outing with the people of Nottingham.
A day to let off steam and enjoy iced brandies or champagne.
Sherry cobblers or sparkling ale.
Gingerbread stores, roundabouts, swing boats and skittle alleys.
All the fun of the fair. No wonder Nottingham races were eagerly anticipated, perhaps especially by those whose houses overlooked the racecourse, allowing them to enjoy the excitements of the day in the comfort of their homes. People like Louisa Dobbs and her friend and neighbour Mary Annie Campbell, who are taking tea together and looking forward to the coming summer races.
Now then, Louisa, do say that you will be having another of your at-homes for the races. It was quite the most interesting afternoon last year. We will all be so disappointed if you don't.
That's kind of you to say, Mary, but I'm not sure Mr. Dobbs is in favour. And we've the children to consider. Gertrude is 13, you know, almost a young lady. And the races are not quite the thing for very young ladies. Mr. Dobbs has the idea we might go out to Wilford Village for the day, as a family, instead.
Oh, that would be a shame. You can take Gertrude and Bernard to Wilford at any time. It's not as though we'll be placing bets or anything, watching from your drawing room, and the children will be out of harm's way in other parts of the house.
If it were down to me, I'd have sent out the invitations already. We did have such fun last year. I've never laughed so much in my life. But Mr. Dobbs is proving difficult to persuade. I'm surprised Mr. Campbell is agreeable to the idea, being such a prominent Baptist preacher.
He's not. He doesn't approve at all, which is why I'm pinning my hopes on you, my dear. Do try and persuade Mr. Dobbs.
I'll do my best, but I can't make any promises. Henry, you're just in time for tea. The pot's still warm.
Capital. Any scones left? Afternoon, Mrs. Campbell. Oh, please don't get up on my account.
It's time I was going home, I'm afraid. Do think about our conversation, Louisa. No, don't get up. I'll show myself out. Goodbye to you both.
Mrs. Campbell's been asking me about the races. Have you thought any more about it, Henry dear?
I have indeed. I've just now been composing a letter to the chairman of the race committee, which I think might just do the trick. May I read it to you? See how it sounds.
Of course, dear.
I've addressed it to Mr. Bennett, the top man. No point writing to one of the clerks. Dear Sir, as I suppose we shall shortly have the races again, I trust you will excuse my pointing out a matter that is to some extent unpleasant. I live in Newell Street, just overlooking the racecourse, and the urinal at such times is placed just opposite our windows. More than this, the boards that are put up are not high enough to hide the men. The drawing rooms of these houses are all upstairs, and the row of men is before our eyes the whole afternoon long. We generally at such times have a number of ladies who come to see the race, not the human race. So you will see, I am sure, that this is not at all pleasant. If the urinal could be removed further from the houses, it would be better. I know that having the matter pointed out, the committee will do their best to remove the annoyance. Louisa, dear, why are you laughing?
The race committee weren't prepared to move the urinals, but they did post 2 police constables to keep watch and prevent any unnecessary exposure.
The measure proved ineffective, as the constables often wandered from their posts, leaving the sheds unsupervised.
2 years later, in 1886, Mary's husband, Owen Campbell, wrote a second letter of protest to the chief constable, asking him to take steps to stop this fearful nuisance. The chief constable forwarded the complaint to the town clerk, effectively washing his hands of the business.
The town council records do not mention whether any further action was taken.
By then, the heyday of the Forest racecourse was over. Nottingham race meetings were suffering from stiff competition from other courses.
Social attitudes were changing too. There was growing disapproval of gambling and excessive drinking, which were increasingly seen as immoral vices.
And there were grave concerns about the management practices of the race committee. To begin with, the committee reported back to the town council and submitted annual accounts. Over the years, it became less communicative and transparent about its proceedings. The accounts were no longer shared with the rest of the council.
In 1882, the auditor insisted on an inspection of the race committee's accounts and discovered they had an independent banking account with over £837 to their credit and at their own disposal, away from any control of the collective council.
The last races on the Forest took place in 1890, after which the racecourse moved to Colic, where the Nottingham races continue to this day, but as a private commercial venture.
With that, the Forest could have lost its vibrant heart. For a time, football had a home on the Forest recreation ground, where Nottingham Forest Football Club was established in 1865, until they moved to their city ground in 1898. But then, in 1928, Nottingham's annual Goose Fair was moved from the Market Square to the Forest, which once more resounded to the people of Nottingham enjoying all the fun of the fair.
And for the rest of the year, the people of Nottingham can enjoy the beauty, peace and tranquillity of one of our original green spaces, preserved for us forever by Nottingham's 1845 Enclosure Act.
This story of the Forest Recreation Ground ends this series of podcasts, which I hope you've enjoyed. The creation of these stories is very much due to the enthusiasm and energy of Karen Wynyard, who wrote and directed them, supported by the technical skills of Katie Jane Clancy and the vocal talents and commitment of the cast members, without whom none of this would have been possible. The part played by the original research project, The Social World of Nottingham's Historic Green Spaces, and the collaboration between community and academic historians in developing the original research on which the stories were based was invaluable. If you'd like to find out more about the original project, have a look at the project website, www.ng-spaces.org.uk. Above all, thank you for listening to these fictional recreations of fascinating and important factual events in Nottingham's social history.